And we're back. We lost all of you. Anyway, so I don't know if I got caught up with the start of the story. So for our next story we have here is the update regarding the Wirecard scandal. So we've been talking about this in previous live streams, and based on the situation that occurred, we don't know, is it just based on one individual, which was Jan Marsalek, who was involved in this fraudulent activity, was able to get away with almost $2 billion worth. Now, based on the succeeding reports, that there were other parties that was involved, not just individuals, but companies and even nations. So the country in the Philippines was mentioned in the involvement of the Wirecard scandal, and now with the latest report, there were mentions of Singapore's billionaire was a Singapore businessman was involved in the Wirecard scandal as well. So let's take a closer look here. Yeah, so whistleblowers warned the Ernst& Young's of Wirecard fraud for 4 years before its collapse. So, meaning to say, what was reported here, it goes way back, right? So, meaning it's not just Wirecard who was involved in the scandal, but as well as the auditing firm who was tasked to investigate and ensure that there's no fraudulent activities that have occurred. So let's see here. So as mentioned here, so an Ernst Young employee mentioned that the senior executives at Wirecard may have committed fraud, and even one of them attempted to bribe an auditor. And what's concerning here, that Ernst Young was a auditor for Wirecard for over a decade, meaning they provided unqualified audits until 2018. And Ernst Young is already under investigation by the German auditors body APAS, and is the target of lawsuit from Wirecard investors who lost billions of euros in the bankruptcy of the company in June. So you can see here, there should be severe repercussions for doing such fraudulent activities here. Not just from government agencies, that investors or individuals can sue the company or individuals who are involved with such, what they call this, devious activities. And as I mentioned here, they didn't carry out the investigation, but it was closed. So who was to stop them? Wirecard's second in command, which was Jan Marcellus. So as mentioned, it contains that there is a conflict of interest if the company to be instigated is the one in charge of the investigating team. So there's a conflict of interest. So how can one monitor the one who's supposed to be investigated here? And according to KPMG, there were revelations that contained in the unpublished information addendum stating that there were damning indictment regarding Ernst& Young, as well as the anonymous whistleblower filed a letter way back in May 2016. Ernst& Young's Germany headquarters in Stuttgart. As mentioned, it focused on one of the four contentious areas that were the subject of Wirecard's special audit. Meaning this was pertaining to the series of acquisition in India that Wirecard completed. So it mentions here, it paid 340 million euros for Hermes, iTickets, you have GI Technology and Star Global. So the three payment companies it had bought from an opaque Mauritius entity called Emerging Market Investment Funds 1A. Oh, that's a very long company. The whistleblower claimed that the general management of Wirecard Germany directly or indirectly held stakes in said company and was therefore involved in conflict of interest. So that's a big no-no if you think about it. And the whistleblower also accused senior executives at the Wirecard of artificially inflating operating profit in Indian companies in a bid to drive up the purchase price, which is part tied to future profits. So obviously, in a conflict of interest, you can dictate the terms here, inflate the price, how much price do you purchase, because it's the same company that purchased it, and so forth. And also, the director of Wirecard, who also held a managerial position at Hermes, offered a local Ernst & Young's employee a personal compensation. So this is where the bribery comes in, right? And on the condition that the auditor agrees to sign the manipulated sales figure, which is, if you look at it, it's very alarming. And another investigation dubbed the Project Ring, they suffered from governance gaps, obviously, and was prematurely closed and left key questions unanswered. I think one of the main questions here is they investigated the situation, there were observations, but it was left unanswered, which is, goes back to the point of, conflict of interest, who can control this, who dictates what the outcome here is, and, it goes back. Who who watches the watchers? In this case, Ernst and Young, right? I think partly, the government agency who has oversight regarding the auditing firms for different companies should be held accountable as well, because the fact that they're able to do this for several years is very alarming if you think about it. If big companies are able to do this, what more for the other companies who are trying to, do their job, be honest about it, because if they can get away with it, other companies will do the same, right? This should be uh, this should be stopped, right, in one way or another. And as mentioned here, the audit was potentially flawed. It cast doubt on the integrity of the financial reporting of Wirecard's Indian subsidiary, obviously, and it was not properly reviewed by the Ernst& Young's audit team who approved the Wirecard's 2017 result. Obviously, the alleged attempted bribery was apparently only dealt internally. It should have been explicitly dealt with an independent third party here. So the list goes on and on, right? And based on latest reports, there was connections between Filipino individuals that has tied with the scandal, and not only that, based on today's report, there were also a Singaporean businessman who was charged by committing nearly 1 billion in Wirecard fraud, according to the report. So let's see here. So you can see. So as mentioned here, the Singaporean businessman was linked to the bankrupt German online payment, who is facing 11 charges for falsely claiming he held nearly $1 billion of multiple accounts here. And the person is the director of a local accounting firm, Mr. R. Shomugaratnam, hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, claimed he held millions of euros in multiple escrow accounts on behalf of the group. And then the latest accusation follows 6 other charges of falsifying letters that misrepresented balances of amounting almost 400 million euros held by his company Citadel. And then the person or the businessman here could face up to 10 years in prison and a fine of, fine for each charge if convicted. I think this is the best way to go. If individuals are at fault here, should be penalized in Singapore, but what will happen in other nations like in Germany, we should wait and see.